Hello students, once again I am welcoming you all in my lecture session on lecture series on electromagnetic theory for Physics 2 third semester BTech course, and the streams under consideration are Computer Science and Engineering and Information Technology. Today, myself, Dr. Sucharita Bhattacharya, Associate Professor of Physics from Guru Nanak Institute of Technology, Kolkata, is starting my lecture session 15. So, where something new is waiting for you. Let us take a look what is there. So today what I will do, I will combine the module 4.03 as well as module 4.04 of module 4 on electromagnetic theory. Actually, we have completed the module 4.03 on time varying fields and Maxwell's equations, but the question discussion part was not done. So today in 15A session, I will first do some specific question discussion. Okay. Then I will move to the session B, 15B, where I will discuss the problem solution on electromagnetic wave and polarization of module 4.04. That means the module what we are running right now. Actually, in the last class, lot of things on the chapter on polarization I have discussed. From there, the specific questions or other problems used to come in university questions. And before going to the next part, I want to do those portions. Okay, that's why I am doing this. Now, let us come to the part A of my lecture session 15, which is based on university questions on time varying field and Maxwell's equations. That means the submodule 4.03. Now let us take a look what are there. The first question, define displacement current. Now, define displacement current means first you have to give the definition of displacement current. You all know that displacement current is represented by JD equal to del D del T. That means time rate of variation of electric displacement vector is called or termed as displacement current, where D, the displacement vector, is represented as epsilon naught into E. So that is the definition of displacement current. Next question is compare between displacement current and conduction current. So in the last class on displacement current, we have done these in the form of the content coverages. So what about the comparison between displacement current and conduction current? I think all of you can remember the definition of conduction current is J equal to sigma into E according to Ohm's law, where sigma is the conductivity of the medium and JD already we mentioned few minutes back. Next question, next point, that since J equal to sigma into E, so conductivity is included. That means the conduction current is associated with the conduction of charge carrier, more specifically the electrons inside a good conductor, because conductivity then comes. And what about the displacement current? It is not at all associated with the motion of the charge carrier. It only arises if there is time variation of electric field is there. That means electric field which is varying with time, the displacement current can arise. That means displacement current can arise in vacuum provided there is time rate of variation of electric field. But conduction current only arises in case inside a good conductor. And obviously, the displacement current can arise in vacuum and conduction current inside a good conductor means they are actually in case of displacement and conduction current, actually we can say that displacement current serves the purpose to make total current continuous across the discontinuity in a conduction current, in a system like charging and discharging of a capacitor. And in the last problem class on the time varying field and Maxwell equations, we have found that displacement current is negligible inside a very good conductor at any frequency lower than the optical frequency. So these are the different comparison points you can mention between displacement and the conduction current. Okay. Now next question. Why Ampere-Sarkitel law was modified? Actually, original Ampere-Sarkitel law was del cross B equal to mu naught J. Now J equal to sigma into E. That means there is no time variation part was included. Not only that, Ampere-Sarkitel law in the original form was not consistent with equation of continuity, the conservation of charge basically. So it requires modification. And then next question is how it was modified. It was Maxwell who first identified that Ampere-Sarkitel law is actually varied one or applicable in case of only static charges, but not it is applicable for the time variation of the field. So what he did, how it was modified means what was his prescription. So he used an additional term in the form of displacement current, and from there he found that this displacement current term must be added with the conduction current term to make the Ampere-Sarkitel law in the modified form to be consistent with equation of continuity, as well as now in the modified form it is valid not only for steady state but also for the time varying field. Okay, so how it was modified, the different steps already done in the class, so you will definitely go for it. Okay, conceptually I am discussing the questions, but the detailed calculations since already have done in the class, so definitely you will do that. Next question is write a short note on displacement current. Now, short note on displacement current means what you know about the displacement current starting from the definition up to the applications. You have to include what you know about displacement current. That means what is the definition, where it arises, how it is used to modify Ampere-Sarkitel law because it is a very special one. Next, the example where displacement current is useful in the case of charging and discharging of a capacitor. Definitely that you will mention in the application part. Okay. Next question. State Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction. All of you know the statement. So E equal to minus d phi dt. That is the mathematical form of the statement. But you have to first give in physical term how to state it. After that, you will go for equal to minus d phi dt. Okay. Now, next one. Obtain the differential form of Faraday's laws from its integral form. That means you have to first write its integral form, then you have to get the differential form. Now, from Faraday's original laws, that is E equal to minus d phi dt, how to get the integral form? The EMF is expressed as closed loop integration E dot dl following the basic definition of EMF. That is equal to, we getting as E. Next is minus d phi dt on the right hand side. That means minus ddt of phi. Phi means magnetic flux. That is surface integration d dot ds. That is the integral form of Faraday's laws. That means on the left what we have E dot dl, on the right on closed loop integration, on the right we have equal to minus ddt of d dot ds on surface integration, using surface integration. Next, what to do? You have to obtain the differential form. For that purpose, what you will do? You will apply the Stokes theorem on the left, and E dot dl will be changed to del cross E dot ds. On the right hand side, you already have surface integration term. So then you will equate the integrands because surface integral holds for any surface big or small. From there you will get the differential form of Faraday's laws, that is del cross E equal to minus del V del T. So all of you can do it very easily. Next question. Write down Maxwell's field equation explaining the symbols used. We all know that there are Maxwell's four field equations in the form of Gauss's law of electrostatics, Gauss's law of magnetostatics, then Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction, and modified Ampere's circuital law. That is Ampere's circuital law as modified by Maxwell. Definitely you all know it. Now you will write them and then explain each and every symbol. Everything is done in very detail in the lecture session. Now come to the question number 7. Show that in vacuum, both electric and magnetic fields obey wave equations. Show that in vacuum, both electric and magnetic fields obey wave equations. We have done this in our class. Definitely in vacuum, you have to first write Maxwell's field equations with relevant changes, because in vacuum means rho equal to 0, sigma equal to 0, epsilon equal to epsilon naught, and mu equal to mu naught. Accordingly, you will get it. Then follow the usual process what we have done in the class, taking curl on both sides of Faraday's laws and the Faraday's laws and Ampere's law. We will get del square E equal to 1 by C square del 2E del T2, and del square B equal to 1 by C square del 2B del T2, which are nothing but the wave equations satisfied by electric field E and the magnetic field B. Here, next question. Assuming a plane wave solutions, show that electromagnetic wave is a transverse wave. That is also done in the class. A plane wave solution means E equal to E0 e to the power I k dot r minus omega t, or B equal to B0 e to the power I k dot r minus omega t. So you will do detailed calculation either with electric field or with magnetic field, and from there we know we can find out that k dot E equal to 0, and similarly k dot B equal to 0. That means electric field, it is expressed in the form of a sinusoidal wave which is perpendicular to direction of propagation of the wave, and similarly B, k dot B equal to 0 we will get, which is also, B is also a sinusoidal wave and it is perpendicular to direction of propagation of the wave. Naturally, electromagnetic wave is a transverse wave that we can very easily show. Next question is, how does velocity of light depends on the properties of the medium? Actually, from the wave equations of electric field and the magnetic field, that is del square E equal to mu naught epsilon naught del 2E del T2, and del square B equal to mu naught epsilon naught del 2B del T2, we have got the idea that mu naught epsilon naught represent 1 by C square from the Helmholtz wave equation, where it was given that V, the velocity of the wave, electromagnetic wave in any material medium, can be expressed as 1 by square root of epsilon into mu. 1 by square root of epsilon into mu is the velocity of the electromagnetic wave in any material medium, where epsilon and mu are the permittivity, rather we can say permittivity, and the mu is the permeability of the material medium. Now, if it is the case of free space, that is for material medium. If it is the case for free space, then epsilon will be replaced by epsilon naught and mu will be replaced by mu naught. Because epsilon r and mu r values are 1 in free space, naturally velocity of light will be 1 by root epsilon naught into mu naught. And by putting the values of epsilon naught and mu naught, it is found that its value is equal to C, the velocity of light in free space. That means in that case, velocity of light will be the free space case, it is c, and in case of the material medium, we know that velocity will be 1 by square root of epsilon into mu, the velocity for electromagnetic wave in material medium. The values will be different, obviously. So I hope you understand the questions, how they can be set and how to give the answers. Okay. Let us now move to the section B, that is problems on polarization. One after another, we will try to do. So the first question, I'm starting with the simplest one. The first question, a glass plate of refractive index 1.55 is to be used as a polarizer. Find the angular polarization. It is the first part. And show that the reflected and refracted rays are at right angles for this angle. That means in this question you have two parts. First is find the angle of polarization. That means P you have to find out, and next you have to show that reflected and refracted rays are at right angles for this angle. Now the problem, how to solve. Just take a look. So what is given? That is mu equal to 1.55 is given. First we have to find out the angle of polarization. The formula we know from Brewster's law, that mu equal to tan P. So what about P? P equal to tan inverse of mu. So tan inverse of 1.55. So it is equal to 57.17 degree. If you do the calculation, you will find it. Okay. So first part done. Next part is very important. You have to show the reflected and refracted rays are at right angles for this angle. Not using the diagram from the data given, you have to show it. Now, mu equal to sine p by sine r according to Snell's law of refraction. Here in place of I, we are using the polarizing angle because it is given like that. So sine p by question is set like that, rather sine p by sine r. Now p value already you found out. So find out the value of sine p, that is 0.8403 it will come, and sine r you have to find out mu value already given. Get the r value 32.82 degree from here, and now add with it, add with r. What to do? R plus p. You will find out r from here. You will get 32.82 degree. This is P already found out. R plus P equal to 90 degree. So what about the angle between reflected and refracted rays? R is the angle of refraction. P is the angle of polarization, that is angle of incidence, and angle of reflection both. So what about the angle between reflected and refracted rays? We have done in the last class through the diagram. That is equal to 180 degree minus r plus p. So 180 degree minus r plus p is nothing but 90 degree. So definitely you are showing that reflected and refracted rays are at right angle for this angle. So easy problem, but second part is a little bit different. Okay. Now let us move to the next one. Now what about the next one? Let us take a look. Determine the Brewster's angle for glass of refractive index 1.5 immersed in water of refractive index 1.33. So look at the question very carefully. Determine the Brewster's angle for glass. Glass Brewster's angle of refractive index. That means with respect to air medium or free space, you can say, which is immersed in water of refractive index. That means water refractive index again with respect to the surrounding medium we are talking about, that is 1.33. So you are asked to find out the Brewster's angle for glass immersed in water. Individually, glass and water refractive indices are given. So how to solve it? Look at mu of glass with respect to air. that is given as 1.5. Glass refractive index means with respect to air, obviously 1.5. Next one is given mu of water. Mu of water again with respect to air. The value is 1.33. So you are asked to find out mu of glass with respect to water. Look here. Mu of glass with respect to water means mu of glass with respect to air by mu of water with respect to air. Look at very carefully. In the numerator, you should have mu of glass with respect to air. In the denominator, mu of water with respect to air. So what you are getting? 1.5 and 1.33 is coming here. You are getting 1.128 and mu means tan P. So from there, you can find out P equal to 48.43 degree. Now look at the question very carefully. That is Brewster's angle you are asked to find out. And in the last class, we have discussed that Brewster's angle is nothing but angle of polarization. Naturally, mu is found out, so tan P equal to that. And from there, you can very easily find out P equal to 48.43 degree. Now look here, this must be written properly. Mu of glass with respect to water means first in the numerator you have to write mu of glass. In the denominator mu of water will come. Then only you will get the correct answer. Otherwise not. So be careful at this point. Now let us move to the next question. Now what about the next question? Calculate the thickness of a doubly refracting crystal required to introduce a path difference of half wavelength between the O ray and the E ray when wavelength is equal to 6000 degree. Given refractive index of the crystal for O ray as 1.55 and refractive index of the crystal for E ray as 1.54. Then is it a positive or negative crystal? So here it is a little bit big question. Let us take a look. Calculate the thickness of a doubly refracting crystal. That means you have to find out the thickness of a doubly refracting crystal. So T is unknown to you. T is unknown to you. What are given? To introduce a path difference of half the wavelength. That means path difference normally we express in terms of D. D equal to lambda by 2. D equal to lambda by 2, half of wavelength. So you have to, it is given to you who have lambda equal to 6000 angstrom. Clear? Now, given refractive index for O ray of the crystal for O ray, because already we know that refractive index always applied for a material medium, not for any light, but in presence of a particular color, you may consider it. So refractive index of O crystal for O ray 1.55. Refractive index of the crystal for E ray is 1.54. You are asked to find out the thickness. Also, it is asked that it is a positive or a negative crystal. Now, this part is easy because mu O and mu E values are given. Mu O equal to 1.55, mu E equal to 1.54. So mu O is greater than mu E. That means VE is greater than VO. So velocity of extraordinary ray is more than velocity of ordinary ray means obviously it is a negative crystal. Obviously it is a negative crystal. That's why we got it. Let us now come to the first part. That what about the path? What about the thickness of the crystal to introduce a path difference of half of wavelength between the O ray and the E ray? Next question naturally comes to your mind, why there will be path difference? Because you know that mu O and mu E values are different. So velocity values are different. So to cover the same thickness, O ray and E ray naturally will take different time. different time, though the thickness is same, because the velocities are different. Naturally, there will be a phase difference as well as a path difference. There will be a path or phase difference arise because velocities are different as refractive indices are different. So to cover the same thickness, there will be a path difference and phase difference. According to physical optical phenomenon, we all know any thickness T is equivalent to optical path of value mu into T. Any thickness T is equivalent to optical path of value mu into T, where mu is the refractive index of the optical medium. So here path difference will be written as mu O minus mu E into T. Mu O minus mu E into T, and that is equal to lambda by 2. It is given as lambda by 2, half of wavelength. So path difference we have written as lambda by 2. I'm sorry. Path difference is written as lambda by 2. Now, T you are asked to find out. What about T? The corresponding thickness. So, T equal to lambda by 2 into 1.55 minus 1.54. That means 0.01. So, put the lambda value which is given as 6000 angstrom. So, 6000 into 10 to the power minus 8 divided by this, we will get the thickness to be equal to 0.003 centimeter. So just take a look. Problem initially appears something very, very different, but it is not like that. But definitely language is something different. So I hope now you are becoming familiar with the language. So because of velocity difference, definitely there will be a path and phase difference to cover the same thickness of the crystal by O ray and the E ray. So from there path difference value we found out because it is delta mu into T and that is given as lambda by 2. Other data are given, so we got, is it clear now? So problem is a little bit different. Clear? So let us move to the next question. An ideal polarizer can at best have a 50% transmission. Prove it from Malus's law. I'm repeating, very, very good question. An ideal polarizer can at best means maximally, have a 50% transmission. Prove it from Malus's law. How to do it? Just take a look. That is our Malus's law. I equal to I0 cos square theta. We have discussed it. Now what about I? I is the transmitted intensity from analyzer. What about I0? Incident intensity on analyzer and definitely coming from polarizer. So the intensity which is coming from polarizer and falling on analyzer, that is I0, and I is the transmitted intensity out of the analyzer. And what about theta? Theta is the angle between the transmission plane of polarizer and analyzer. Theta is the angle between the transmission plane of polarizer and analyzer. It was the original Malus's law. But here it is given that ideal polarizer can at best have a 50% transmission. That means here no analyzer is given, one polarizer is given, and you have to start with unpolarized light so that you can show that ideal polarizer can transmit maximally 50% polarized light. Clear? So again we are writing Malus's law, I equal to I0 cos square theta. But what about I here? Here I equal to intensity of transmitted plane polarized light from polarizer. Intensity of the transmitted plane polarized light from polarizer. What about I0 here? Intensity of unpolarized light. Because you are starting with unpolarized light and that is passing through polarizer to give you the intensity of transmitted plane polarized light. Clear? Naturally, what will be theta? This time theta will be the angle between the direction of vibration of plane polarized light and unpolarized light. unpolarized light, which has no specific direction. I am coming to this point once more. Very carefully, you listen. In this case, you had plane polarized light falling on analyzer to give you the final transmitted intensity. Naturally, the angle was between plane of analyzer and plane of polarizer. Clear? Now, in this case, you have to show that the polarized light, plane polarized light out of polarizer starting with unpolarized light, you can show maximum 50% unpolarized light can be transmitted after polarization even by an ideal polarizer. Naturally, what about the angle here? Angle will be between the direction of vibration of polarized light as well as unpolarized light. Angle between direction of vibration of polarized light and unpolarized light. Now for unpolarized light, we know that all vibration direction perpendicular to direction of propagation are equally possible. So theta cannot be specified here because for unpolarized light, no specific vibration direction is there. So theta can be replaced by theta average. I is the intensity of transmitted plane polarized light. I0 is the intensity of unpolarized light. And theta is the angle between the direction of vibration of polarized light and unpolarized light, which has no specific vibration direction. So theta will be replaced by theta average. That means cos square theta will be replaced by cos square theta average. And what is the cos square theta average value? Maximum value of cos square theta equal to 1. Minimum value of cos square theta equal to 0. So what about cos square theta average? 1 plus 0 by 2, that is half. So we are getting half I0 equal to I. So intensity of transmitted plane polarized light is half of I0, means it is 50% of I0. 50% of I0, where I0 is the intensity of unpolarized light. Very, very important conclusions. Actually, through Malus's law, you have found out it, but these conclusions can be used in questions too. So be careful, and I hope all of you understand. Okay, let us now apply this to the next problem. What about that? Unpolarized light, if incident on two cross polarizers, is not transmitted. Unpolarized light, if incident on two cross polarizers, is not transmitted. On insertion of a third polarizer between them, light may be transmitted, explained by Malus's law. So we all know that for two cross polarizers, light will not transmit at all. But if you insert a third polarizer between them, light may be transmitted. You have to explain by Malus's law. Let us take a look how to do it. Just take a look. So this is the first polarizer, P1. This is the second polarizer, P2. Look at, they are kept at 90 degree with respect to each other. That's why the planes of transmissions are drawn like that. That means they are crossed. Clear? In that situation, you will get no light at all starting from this end to that end. If light starts from this end, this side, you will get no light at all because it is at 90 degree with respect to this one. Now you insert a third polarizer P3 in between, and you have to show that light may be transmitted here. Okay. Now let us consider P3 is inserted in between P1 and P2 by making an angle, say theta, with respect to P1. We don't know. Let it be theta. Naturally, with respect to P2, what about the corresponding angle? 90 minus theta, because angle between P1 and P2 is 90 degree. Clear? Now we are starting with unpolarized light I0. Okay. So after coming out of P1, what we are getting? I1, the first step of the polarization, that is the polarized light. What about I1? I1 equal to half I0. We have seen few minutes back. Clear? Now this I1 will pass through P3 to have I3. P3 is kept at theta with respect to P1. So according to Malus's law, what about I3? I3 equal to I1 cos square theta. I3 equal to I1 cos square theta. I1 value we already know, that is half I0 cos square theta. Clear? Next is I2 you will get at the output by passing through the polarizer P2. Now the light falling on P3 is I1. It will come out as I3. The value of I3 we already got. Now I3 will come out through P2 as I2. The angle between P3 and P2 is 90 minus theta. So what about I2? I2 equal to I3 cos square 90 minus theta. I2 equal to I3 cos square 90 minus theta. That means I3 sin square theta. I2 equal to I3 sin square theta. Now what about I3? I3 equal to half I0 cos square theta. Half I0 cos square theta into sin square theta. So I2, the final transmitted intensity, what we got as half I0 cos square theta sin square theta. Definitely it will not be 0 provided theta is not equal to 0 and 90 degree. It will not be 0 for any angle other than 0 degree and 90 degree. Let us first verify for any angle what about the situation. Say theta equal to 30 degree. Theta 30 degree means sine 30 is half. So sine square 30 half into half. And what about cos 30? Root 3 by 2 whole square. So 3 by 4 and half I0 is as usual. So what we are getting? 3 by 32 into I0, which is definitely not 0. You can try with any other angle of theta, say 45 degree, 60 degree, like that. But don't try with theta equal to 0 or 90. Why? If theta equal to 0 means these P1 and P3 will be placed parallel. Okay, P1 and P3 parallel, and this is crossed. So with parallel system, you are crossing it. Naturally, you will not expect anything outside P2. If you keep theta equal to 90, then what will happen? If theta equal to 90, that means P1 and P3 will be crossed and P3 and P2 will be parallel. That means again cross system is maintained. So out of P2 you will get 0. That means P3 you are inserting in between P1 and P2 to actually nullify the effect of cross polarizers. That's why you are getting something at the output. Very, very important problem. I hope you understand it very clearly. Okay. Sorry. Let us now come here. This question is said in a different language, but it is very, very similar to the last one. Let us take a look. A thin polaroid is interposed between a pair of cross polaroids and made to rotate at a rate omega. That means angular frequency about their common axis. If unpolarized light of intensity I0 falls on the first polaroid, then show that the transmitted intensity is I equal to I0 by 16 into 1 minus cos 4 omega t. That means this problem is exactly similar to the last one. A thin polaroid is interposed between a pair of cross polaroids and made to rotate about their common axis. Now unpolarized light, that means incident beam, falls on the first polaroid is I0. Show that the final transmitted intensity is this one. Just take a look. So in the last set we have found I2 equal to half I0 cos square theta sin square theta. Just a few minutes back we have got it. Now here in this question, theta equal to omega t, because omega is the rate of rotation. So what about theta? Equal to omega into t at time t. Here. Now look here. The way it has been given, we have to change our form of this equation. Half I0, now sine square theta cos square theta. That means sine theta by 2 whole square. Simple trigonometry we have to use. Sine 2 theta means 2 sine theta cos theta. Here cos square theta and sine square theta is given. So we will get sine 2 theta by 2 whole square because square is given. Okay. Next. 2 whole square means 1 by 2 whole square means 1/4. So 1 by 8 I0 sine square 2 theta. What we are getting from here. Now cos 2 theta equal to cos square theta minus sine square theta. So from there we can get sine square theta equal to 1 minus cos 2 theta by 2. So sine square theta is equal to 1 minus cos 2 theta by 2. So here sine square theta, actually 2 theta. So sine square 2 omega t. How to write it? 1 minus cos 2 theta. In place of theta, it is 2 theta. In place of 2 theta, it will be 2 into 2 theta. That means 4 theta means 4 omega t. So 1 by 8 I0 sine square 2 omega t. Sine square theta equal to 1 minus cos 2 theta by 2. Replace theta by 2 omega t. What you will get? 4 omega t by 2. So you are getting 1 by 16 I0 into 1 minus cos 4 omega t. Very, very easy. Exactly same one. If you take a look properly, you can get it very easily, isn't that? Okay, let us now move to the next question. That is, two polarizers are crossed to each other. These type of questions are very common, but set in different way. That's why I have chosen this. Two polarizers are crossed to each other. One of them is then rotated through 60 degrees. Calculate the percentage of incident unpolarized light that will pass through the optical system. Look at, it is set in a different way. Two polarizers are crossed to each other, just what we have done in previous two problems with which we started. Then one of them rotated through 60 degrees. So now the angle between them is 30 degrees. Calculate the percentage of incident unpolarized light that will pass through the optical system. Okay. Now just take a look where we have made the changes. This is the first polarizer. This is the second polarizer. Incident beam is I0. They were crossed. That means angle is 90 degrees. Now one of them is rotated, maybe any one. Naturally, the angle will be 30 degrees in between now. Now, when I0 unpolarized light coming out of first polaroid or polarizer, we will get half I0 the intensity of I1. So intensity coming out of N1, I1 equal to half I0. Already we have proved that. Now, the angle between these two are is 30 degrees. So what about the output transmitted intensity? I2 equal to I1 cos square 30 degrees. I2 equal to I1 cos square 30 degrees. What about the cos square 30 degrees? Cos 30 means root 3 by 2. So it is 3 by 4 into I1. So what about I1? I2 equal to 3 by 4. Now I1 equal to half I0. So what we are getting? 3 by 8 into I0. This 3 by 8 into I0 is nothing but 37.5% of I0. That is the percentage of light which will come out to the system. That is I0 and final intensity is I2. So similar questions but set in different forms. So these are the typical questions which are normally set. These type of questions are normally set in university papers. So students, that's why we have discussed this. And since in the last class, you are becoming familiar, you were introduced with this formula and the definitely conception. That's why I thought before you just forget everything, let us do the problems. It will be much more helpful for you. Okay. So thank you, my dear students. I hope you have enjoyed the class. So stay safe and stay healthy. Again, I will meet you in the next class. Okay. So thank you.